Okay, Excellencies, distinguished guests, good morning to everyone. Welcome to today's event on AI for humanity. The focus is on charting the global course for human rights-based governance. As this year's chair of the Freedom Online Coalition, the Kingdom of the Netherlands is proud to host this important event and to have you all here with us. We'll start with opening remarks by two high-level speakers. It's my great honor to give the floor to our first speaker, His Excellency Casper Veldkamp, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Minister, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bea. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good to see you all here today. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of the Netherlands to today's event on AI and human rights. Artificial intelligence can drive economic growth and social progress. It can predict diseases, hurricanes, and the effects of climate change. And it can help solve the most complex global challenges, such as poverty and inequality. But it can also go horribly wrong. Algorithms that discriminate led to thousands of people in the Netherlands being wrongly accused of fraud by the tax authorities, for example. Artificial intelligence is a recipe for both progress and disaster, promise and failure. And that's precisely why we must ensure that AI is developed and used responsibly, with human rights at its core. Some say that protecting rights hampers innovation, that this is a persistent misconception that keeps resurfacing. Because through the course of the Industrial Revolution, we learned that protecting the rights of workers and banning child labor did not hinder economic growth. In fact, it fueled it by creating healthier, more productive and stronger societies. And we now see that when AI systems respect privacy, fairness and equality, they can propel sustainable development that benefits everyone. And that's why we need robust international standards, norms, and governance. For example, on how responsible AI in finance can give more people access to credit, while preventing discrimination, promoting digital inclusion, helping us close the digital divide. Much like workers' rights during the Industrial Revolution, which boosted productivity and growth, innovation grows stronger when built on a foundation of human rights. So I'm glad we've brought together such a diverse group today, because it's precisely through this kind of broad international cooperation that we can build an AI governance model that both stimulates innovation and safeguards the rights of all people. If this kind of collaboration that offers us the best chance of creating a level playing field, harnessing AI for the SDGs, and mitigating the human rights risks that AI can. And that's what makes our coalition different. It is a vital platform that is essential for protecting human rights in the digital age. And while we might not be expanding quite as fast as a viral AI meme spreads, we are growing steadily as a coalition. In this light, it's an honor for me to welcome into our group Cabo Verde, Slovenia, and Colombia, who joined just a few days ago, strengthening our capacity to protect and promote human rights online all over the world. And as chair of the Freedom Online Coalition, the Netherlands is committed to promoting transparency, accountability, and the human-centered use and development of technology at every level. This year's Global Digital Compact and the World Summit on the Information Society are new opportunities to do just that. Here we can and must ensure that digital governance is grounded in human rights. So, dear friends, I cannot predict the future, but what I do know is this. The decisions we make now will determine whether AI becomes a tool for division or inclusion, for exploitation or empowerment, for recession or growth. Together, we must chart the global course for human rights-based governance, and write that recipe for true progress. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your opening remarks. And now it's my privilege to invite the second speaker to the podium, the Minister of Information Technologies and Communications of the Republic of Colombia. The floor is yours, Your Excellency, Mauricio Liscano, please.
Well, good morning, everyone. Excellencies, distinguished minister, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and privilege to join you today to discuss such an important and timely subject, artificial intelligence and human rights is profound significant for human rights. I want to express my sincere gratitude on behalf of the Colombia government to the government of Netherlands and the Freedom Online Coalition for this special invitation and for organizing such a crucial conversation. Artificial intelligence is already changing the world. We in Colombia are working to create a strong strategy based especially in human rights. We believe that this is like a paradigm in which we have to stay. The center of the artificial intelligence should be, it has to be the human beings. The question we always do in Colombia as a government when we create this kind of public policies, if we are going to create an entity who is going to be much more power than our brains and our minds and the human beings, how we are going to control it and not this powerful entity called artificial intelligence is not going to control us. So based on this question, we work all the time in the Colombian government. We have like strategies and enablers. In strategies, we're working in research, we're working in development of models, especially for the environmental sustainability. We have created, for example, model to protect the Amazon jungle with Microsoft. With the sound of the animals, we can detect if animals are disappear or extinguished in the Amazon jungle. We also have been creating models in terms of healthcare and models to solve and work against poverty. In the goals of SDG goals, we working on that issues too. We also working in Colombia, especially in the use of ethical and responsible AI, especially from the view of risk. We are now creating a compass, is like a long-term public policy, but this public policy is divided in what AI application have any risk for the human beings. For example, military AI solution has a lot of risk, so we are forbidden, or it has to be a permit from the Colombian government, but if one application for mobility, which is just free to use. So we are regulating the AI from the point of view of risk, and also we're working in Colombia in terms of how a path of ethical and responsible use, especially as we mentioned in human rights. The other part we're working in Colombia is about education and democratization. We want not just become a producer of AI and also a producer of AI, but also we will become a producer of AI instead of consumer of AI, and that we want to democratize the using of AI, not just to one elite of the population, but everyone else. In terms of the guidelines, we're also working in other issues, but I would like to focus on what things we are working in terms of human rights. We are working in protecting data privacy. It's one of our main points of the ethical use and responsible use of AI. We want to ensure fairness and justice, especially because AI has a lot of problems in terms of diversity. It's not clear how models can see the difference between women and men and blacks and whites or Afro-Colombians or even indigenous population, that we have a strong indigenous population in Colombia. So we are working nowadays with this kind of population, especially in order to don't leave anyone behind in this strategy. And also we are working to closing the digital divide or the gap of digital inclusion in Colombia between areas, between genders, between populations, and between areas, especially working in rural areas. That's why we have a strong strategy in terms of connectivity. We cannot talk about AI, we cannot talk in human rights, in technology, if even people is not connected. So we want to reach the 85% of the population being connected in Colombia with high-speed internet, but not just the connectivity, but also mindful connectivity in which people has a appropriation and use of the technology to close the division and the gap and the inequality what we see in technology nowadays. Finally, we would like to congratulate the government of Netherlands for this invitation, congratulate this coalition that we joined this 2 months ago, the Freedom, and we would like to, the Freedom Online Coalition, and we really are very happy in the name of the President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, and our external minister to join this coalition and to work together that the centric of the artificial intelligence has to be the human being, has to be the human rights. Human rights is not an old-fashioned idea. We think human rights is still being present, and everything we do and everything we plan to do in terms of internet, in artificial intelligence, has to be have this brand, has to be have these limits, and the limit is human rights. We still believe in that. Our government is very humanitarian, is very human, and is, as you may know, President Petro is fighting a lot of strong issues in the world. Like, for example, we are not exploring more oil. We want to become a clear energy country, even for the producer part. We are working very hard on the energetic transition part, in which artificial intelligence play an important role, and we working very hard in terms of humanitarian and human rights strategies. So thank you for the invitation, and can Colombia on this huge coalition and on become artificial intelligence a human being strategy. Thanks a lot.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alison Gilwald. I'm the Executive Director of Research ICT Africa, a African digital policy and regulatory think tank based in Cape Town, but working across Africa, and the University of Cape Town's Nelson Mandela School of Public Governance. I'm very delighted to speak after these excellent keynotes and to thank the ministers from the Netherlands and Colombia, Minister Veldkamp and Minister Luciano, and particularly for the Minister from Colombia's remarks on the importance aspects of inequality that need to be addressed, that we can't simply put this high-level human rights framework on existing inequalities, and that as we layer advanced technologies over each other, we are in fact amplifying inequalities. I'd like to get our first panel going, and if you wouldn't mind coming up as I introduce you, we're of course delighted to have the UN Commissioner for Human Rights, Mr. Volker Turk. If you'd come up, please. And of course, Shabanaz Rashid Daya, the Executive Director of Tech Global Institute, who's also on the FSC Advisory Committee. And Sarah Heck, who's in charge of policy, I believe, at Anthropic. And well known as a member of the board, but also a high-level advisory board on AI member, Nigat Dad. I was going to sit here, but I think people might not see you, so maybe when you speak, we could also just come to the podium. I don't know if that's going to work, if the organizers can do with that. So just to say that obviously it's very historic to be here at the time of the Global Digital Compact and to be discussing this with the recently released AI for Humanity final report. People have spoken extensively already about the rapid advancement in artificial intelligence and the host of opportunities and risks that it provides. A lot of the Global Digital Compact documents, a lot of the AI for Humanity documents start with these references to the potential of AI for planetary solutions. And then, of course, the challenges and the risks that need to be mitigated in order to achieve those. But I think as we currently stand, there are, in fact, far more evidence of risks and harms, and also the growing unevenness in the distribution of opportunities that go with AI. And I think this is one of the questions that we really want to address as we look to see to what degree the AI for Humanity report aligns with international law and with international human rights frameworks. Of course, this event is organized by the Netherlands as chair of the FOC, and has been the question that they've been asking this panel to address is how comprehensive AI governance frameworks can be fully aligned with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and international human rights law, as emphasized in emphasized by all in the 193 United Nations member states that passed the first resolution on AI. I think it's important to acknowledge the enormous changes that we face. Although the central rights framing of FOC has remained at the core, the issues that we've been dealing with have become so complex and they have shifted so significantly over the time that we've been dealing with this, that it really raises the question of what role this platform must play in order to address these enormous challenges. This discussion aims to harness key insights from the human rights-based AI governance, drawing on the AI Humanity report. But I think we also want to challenge it in terms of, or challenge ourselves in terms of what FOC needs to do in order to ensure that the widely referenced rights framework of the AI and Humanity report actually deals with these enormous inequalities. I think if we look at the references to the rights frameworks, these are still very much framed within the first-generation rights, critical, important first-generation rights. But I think these rights, there's been a lot of work done on their failure to be implemented by many people. Many people in many countries across the world lack the capabilities to exercise these rights, or these rights, despite their governments being signatories to them, are not held up by rule of law in those countries. And so I think it's really incumbent on us to look at how we are going to ensure that those rights frameworks do deliver to all and do serve all. And I think there's, again, I think we need to look at not only the kind of compliance and breach framework on human rights, but actually look at what we need to do in order to ensure that we redress some of the inequalities that are there and that we ensure that those rights are meaningful for all. And I think the challenge here, and I think it's going to be the challenge with the AI for Humanity report, is the exercising not only of the rights framework, but what is going to be done to redress the economic opportunities. And how is that going to happen? Because the AI framework currently, the AI for Humanity report currently, the references in the GDC Compact, Global Digital Compact, for example, are very strong on the rights frameworks, but they're not actually telling us as much as we probably need to know on the economic side, on the development side, of how people are going to actually be able to see those benefits for sustainable development goals and for other objectives of these reports. So with that, I'd like to firstly turn to Volker Turk, and ask you how we might effectively integrate human rights standards into the development and governance of AI to prevent these human rights abuses of which we have spoken, and particularly the risks that go with trying to ensure that this framework meets developmental goals. I think unless people can see you from there. Everybody see? No, I think it would be better if you...
Well, I'm really thrilled that, first of all, this panel is taking place in the margins of the Summit of the Future and also the UNGA. It's great that there is a focus on human rights, both by governments, but also, of course, by all the other stakeholders. That's absolutely critical. And what I wanted to share, it's a bit what you have just mentioned. I think on the one hand, human rights is actually the content of innovation. It's the mission, if you like. It reminds me a little bit of when we launched this concept of a human rights economy, because when you look at economic systems more generally, economic systems rarely take into account the obligations that states themselves have when it comes to human rights, be it economic, social, cultural, or civil and political ones. And I think it's important also in this area of digital transformation to look at what is it, what's the purpose of innovation, what's the purpose of pushing the boundaries, what is it that we are actually trying to achieve here, and to give it the content. And the best content that you can have is precisely what is contained in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because it emerged from cataclysmic events, and it emerged as a vision for humanity's future, for our relationship with the planet, with our relationship with nature, and our relationship among each other. So I find it interesting when I listen to Professor Mariana Mazzucato, and she wrote The Mission Economy. I actually thought you almost need a mission digital transformation view, which is filled with human rights. And I think that's one very important aspect, which actually gives a vision, it gives content, it influences also those who engage in technological developments, and actually make sure that this shared humanity is front and center. Then there is the risk side. And the risk side absolutely clearly needs to take into account the human rights framework. And it's not about ethics, because there's sometimes this myth that it can be addressed by having ethical discussions. That's good and it's important. But let's not forget we have a legally binding framework that exists, that is universal, where we actually cut through the myth that there is a distinction between the world offline and the world online. No. I mean, it is absolutely clear that human rights apply wherever human interaction takes place. And I think we need to work through, as a result, what are the implications of each and every human right and digital development. And we have looked at risk frameworks. In fact, I had a chance to go to Silicon Valley earlier this year. I sat down with the big tech companies to have precisely this discussion, and looking at their risk frameworks and making sure that they are comprehensively addressing each and every impact on each and every right that we have, be it labor, be it freedom of expression, be it privacy, be it issues of environment, be it issues of how to deal with disinformation, hate speech, be it, especially in the election period that we're all in, around the world, and how can we make sure that in the development of whatever comes through AI, that there is an inbuilt risk assessment that takes into account the impact that it has on fundamental human rights and fundamental freedoms. And as in anything, it brings us back to human agency and human dignity, and it brings us back to what is so fundamental about whatever we are doing in any area of business. And there is, and I have brought you two documents. We have an existing tech project, which is multi-stakeholder, which looks at the taxonomy of risks from a human rights perspective, and precisely addressed last year advancing responsible development of deployment of generative AI. And it was really a multi-stakeholder effort to look at this taxonomy of risk. And we work with business because we, of course, have the big business forum and human rights every year in Geneva. Last year, we had over 4,000 participants, and we had a special session on artificial intelligence, generative AI and human rights, launching the taxonomy. And we will come up with another one, which is making sure that the UN guiding principles on business and human rights are addressed and systematically analyzed for the various tech companies around the world. And of course, it's the big ones, but we also have seen, and it's interesting to hear from the minister from Colombia, because of course, it's not only happening in Silicon Valley, it's happening all around the world. And there is a huge need for advisory services on regulation, on how to apply the guiding principles and human rights and translate them into action. And it was good that the Global Digital Compact recognized the need for these advisory services that are everywhere in the world, not just for governments, but also for businesses. And to have this discussion with them, how we can actually go into the granular detail of the human rights framework and see how it applies in this particular area of business and generative AI. I think that's really the big challenge that we have in front of us, but there is a lot of work that has happened. It will always mean multi-stakeholder, civil society, private sector, and governments. And I think we see the beginning with the AI report, but also, of course, with the Global Digital Compact. Yeah, we can very much build on it, and events like this help us too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Turk. And you've made an important point about stakeholder participation, that these rights frameworks need implementation, and those should happen within a human rights framework. And so I'm just wondering if, Shabnaz, you might be interested in taking up some of those issues raised by Mr. Turk, and really to talk about some of the criteria that should guide the Freedom Online Coalition as we look at the AI Humanity Report, how it can be implemented, and how that implementation can be inclusive with very, very many different regimes that are responsible for it.
Thank you, Alison. I think you started the discussion with this question about how do we balance between human rights and economic development. And maybe I can start by challenging it a little bit. I think for some time now, sustainable development has been misconstrued to justify grave violations of human rights under the guise of broad economic development. And this is particularly true for countries in the global south, including one where I come from, which is Bangladesh. And there's often an inadvertent collateral impact of bilateral and multilateral funding instruments. So I think if I build on what Mr. Turk said, this dichotomy in my mind is a bit of a false dichotomy. Human rights principles and international human rights law, especially those enshrined in the ICCPR, should form the basis of any sustainable development. And you don't have to look very far to realize that in my country, Bangladesh, which perhaps is one of the most striking examples of what happens when economic development precedes over human rights. Despite being one of the fastest growing economies in the world, in the last 2 months, we've seen, or maybe it's just a month now, in the last 1 month, we have seen how the people of Bangladesh have rejected that growth narrative in order for them to be able to respect their human rights, to have the right to speech, the right to privacy, the right to peaceful assembly, and we have seen what has happened with the political situation in the country. And so, given this example that we have, this very striking example that we have, I believe that human rights principles in AI is not a choice, it's a must. And we have to ensure that, and to building on, again, what Mr. Turk said, in terms of the framework of AI ethics, oftentimes we see good AI through the lens of ethics. But ethics is oftentimes very contextually situated. Ethics that applies to one context does not apply to another context. Ethics is both a philosophical question as well as a computational question. And so human rights in that way provides us with something a little bit more international, something that's universal, something that is legally binding, and perhaps gives countries a better starting point in terms of how they're thinking about not just AI, but any kind of technology and economic growth. So building on that sort of broader framework, if I zoom into the Freedom Online Coalition, I think, the coalition has 40 member states right now, which is incredible. And I think obviously an obvious sort of response to that question of how do we expand the membership, how do we think about the Freedom Online Coalition, is often by saying that we want more representation of the Global South. But I want to push us a little bit further. It's not just representation of the Global South, but also countries that deeply, deeply care about human rights. We have seen countries like India, Pakistan, Thailand, who have ratified the ICCPR, but fail to uphold those human rights principles. And so perhaps a criteria for the Freedom Online Coalition, as it considers expanding its remit and expanding its work in the world of emerging technologies, is to include member states who have been an example of actually upholding human rights principles and can bring those very real, practical experiences to the table as they're expanding on this body of work. The second, perhaps, criteria that we should probably think about is around thinking about countries at different stages of economic development or technology development. Oftentimes when we think about AI and very robust emerging technologies, we forget that more than half of the world's population is missing, and they're not part of that conversation. And so as the Freedom Online Coalition thinks about its remit in the technology space, it's particularly important to also think about how do we engage with member states and non-state actors who are from these countries who do not have access to those technologies. There's obvious resource gaps, but they need to be part of the conversation so that we can ground ourselves to thinking about how do we think about redistribution of resources? How do we think about who's coming online and who's staying offline? What are the criteria that we set in order to make sure, in order to bring new technology into the market? How do we negotiate with companies that are larger than our own GDPs? These are very real questions for countries to think about. And I hope as the Freedom Online Coalition and collectively with the advisory network, we're trying to grapple with these questions, but perhaps that's a starting point in terms of asking those tough questions and thinking about it as a framework of how do we engage more with a more diverse group of stakeholders, especially in the AI space. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shabnaz, for that. And obviously, important that we also challenge some of those equations of, rights and just and inclusive growth with purely GDP and economic growth, which, as you point out, has been so widely rejected in Bangladesh. Important to this rights framework is the implications also for people who are practically working in AI. There's obviously been a lot of critique around this in the last few years. The frameworks of ethical, ethics by design, the substitution of ethics for rights, and some of those practical challenges when you're in peace. Sarah, if you'd share with us your views on that.
This feels very formal speaking when this was supposed to be a panel, and I thought it was going to be a little more conversational, but I'll try to keep it conversational. I'm Sarah Heck. I am here representing Anthropic. For those of you that don't know who we are one of the leading frontier LLM model labs. We have a chatbot called Claude. If you haven't used it, I hope that you'll go try it out and give us some feedback. But I think we are a company that has had ethics at our core from the beginning, but also has tried to live out that sort of core of our mission in our day-to-day practice in the way that we build our models. And I think it's important to say from the outset that we all know that we're in the early days of large language models, generative AI, and while we have made huge leaps in the past 2 years, even in the last 6 months, we are really at the early stages. And so I think it would be ridiculous for me to stand up here and say that, this is where we're going and this is how we're going to do it. And it will take everybody in this room, private sector, civil society, government, and academia to really move this field forward. And we're going to have to do it in ways that are smarter than we've done with other technology advances in the past. I think my hope is that I can be here and represent a interesting path that we have taken in terms of human rights and ethical AI and human rights. The way that our model is trained is on something called constitutional AI. And this is unique to Anthropic. And when we started to build our model, one of the things we thought about was, what are the values of the outputs of that model? So you go in, you write your prompt. Maybe it's complex, maybe it's about government, maybe it's about what you want to eat for dinner tomorrow, or anything in between. And what does the output look like? And so we actually train our model on a constitution. This constitution was developed based on the UN Declaration of Human Rights, as well as several other constitutions from around the world. So what does this mean in practice? You're putting data in, you train the model, and then there's a part of model training called fine-tuning. And we essentially ensure that every output that comes out of our model as we train it adheres to this constitution. Originally, when we created this constitution, it was our researchers sort of thinking about how we could do this more ethically. But as we moved along, we realized, of course, it is not fair for just a handful of people in a room in San Francisco to be determining what this constitution is. So we've actually worked with outside parties to go and sort of test what our constitution is and ensure that it is in keeping with sort of a multi-stakeholder view of how a model should be trained. We have a lot of information in the research on our website if you want to go check it out. And again, check it out. We love your feedback on it because we're continually evolving in this space. So that's something that's been very important to us and core to how our model works. As a result, if you use Claude, you will probably get frustrated sometimes because it will not give you an answer to certain things that it feels like is not an appropriate question for it to be answering. And so you'll see sort of differences in ways that you can implement models and how you can train models and what the outputs are. I think another thing that is useful to point out here, again, sort of, I don't know if this is quite in the ethical space or human rights space or maybe a little bit of both, but we don't use user inputs to train our model. And I think that this has been a important choice for us, again, because you can imagine a world where somebody who is very concerned about their human rights being violated in whatever country puts something in and then is asking who is reading what my input is. And so I think this is a conscious choice that we have made, again, in sort of the spirit of how do we ensure a model that is fast growing and the capabilities are growing, are still being grounded in some of the truths of what we know to be good human rights practices. And then I will just say that, again, this is a nascent field, and we are sort of known for being the guys that do safety and security. I think probably as well as anybody in the field, it's something we're very focused on. And we have instituted a sort of a check on our system that we call our responsible scaling policy. But essentially, it is a safety and security protocols that we publish to say if when we release models, they do not meet these safety and security standards, and we can mitigate safety and security risks at different levels, we will actually not deploy a model. And so I think that there is something really important to be said about raising the bar for model providers across the world. As you know, it's a small group now, but I imagine it will only grow over time. There will be large models and there will be small models. But making sure that we are all assessing both catastrophic risks, things like bionuclear, et cetera, but also systemic risk. And I would put sort of human rights violations in that systemic category. And that we are more thoughtful and increasingly thoughtful about what the outcomes are of our models and how we can make sure that they are safe when they're developed, deployed, and used. So that's something that's incredibly important to us. I want to talk about something that I think is something that many of us in the AI space are talking about this week, especially with the report coming out from the high-level AI board at the UN yesterday. Scientific research is really important. And it's important to do scientific research in the hard sciences space in AI, but also the social sciences space. And I know that this is a recommendation that the HLab is very focused on in their report. I recommend you go read it. But we need to make sure that we actually understand how these models are being used. I loved hearing the minister from Colombia speak. I remember in sort of my early days in in international affairs, Facebook being used to create some of the protests against the FARC that led to a lot of incredible work. But also you see in the election in 2016, malicious actors using Facebook. And so we know that there are helpful and harmful things that technology can do, and this will only be amplified. But we need to know what those things that are going to happen are going to be before they happen. And a lot of this comes from quality scientific research that I think today is being done in some of the labs. We do some, there are some academic institutions that do some, but we need a lot more of it, and there are just not enough people doing it. So this is a call not only for governments and academia to do more, to think about how we fund that sort of research so that we can all go into this with eyes wide open. And then I think also there's, many of us that either sit on the government side or on the lab side that are sort of hearing this call for, okay, governments are going to use AI, and what does that look like? And many of us will go on to an event, I think, after this at the State Department that the State Department is putting on to talk about how we are seeing governments implement AI. But we actually need to start small. I think that we have sort of these grandiose dreams of like what AI is doing, and some of those things it can do now, and some of those things we'll have to wait for the future. It won't be, I think, that long until we do them in the future. But we need to sort of start small, see what those projects are, see how it's affecting human rights in either positive or negative ways, and have sort of this immediate feedback loop, because this technology is moving so quickly that if we are not creating those feedback loops and then a flywheel for that, I fear that the train will have already left the station. So those are my thoughts from the private sector. I'd love to have more of a conversation with anybody here rather than giving a speech again, but thanks for your time, and appreciate the conversation.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Hopefully we'll have time just for you to respond to each other before we close off. But before we do, I do want to, of course, turn to Nigat. And you, I guess, a bit in a difficult position. Of course, also representing the high level on AI, but also the Better Oversight Board. And I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of the issues there. I mean, I think, the report certainly is speaking about these governance gaps, standards gaps, and trying to get the kind of coordination that one needs for these to be effective at the global level. But I think there has still been some critique that the report still fails to address some of those underlying inequalities and disparities that were spoken about. So if you're working with a full data set that you can unbiased, that is one thing. But when you're talking on a kind of global level, at that systemic risk that was spoken about, and the majority of the world is invisible, underrepresented, or discriminated against by current AI systems, the challenges of addressing that, doing that, of course, difficult to address in a high-level document of that kind. But if you could just speak, beyond some of the kind of technical standards and obvious governance issues around the implementation, how that will work, how these fundamental and systemic issues are going to be addressed. Otherwise, we're just going to have the rights framing on top.
I'll sit here.
Can everybody see?
Yeah, I can see, and I think they can see me as well, and here. But you mentioned Measures Oversight Board and the High-Level Advisory Board, and before that, I'm a civil society actor from actual global south, global majority country. And I think when last year when we started working as a UN Secretary General's high-level board, Secretary General himself set the tone that how we are going to work as a board and what kind of recommendations he would like to see. And the tone was basically around our focus should be international human rights framework and global south, global majority countries. And I think we as a board, in a very short time, I would say, worked really in a fast-paced environment, spoke to 2,000 individuals, received so many hundreds of expert submissions, and worked really hard. And I completely acknowledge what you are saying, Alison, that when we talk about international human rights framework, and this high-level framework around governance when it comes to human rights, it's difficult that how we can translate this when we are working towards such a mission, which is no one has set the tone in the past, but the whole report, the recommendations that we have given were centered around human rights conversations, were centered around Global South. And some of us from Global South, from civil society, tried to become the voice of the civil society of Global South so that it translates into the recommendations. And the recommendations that we have given, it's not just a piece of paper. They were adopted yesterday in the GDC process, the objective number 5. It's the establishment of AI Fund, International Scientific Panel, and Global Dialogue on AI Governance. And why? We said that so that the power concentration shouldn't be with just 7 countries who are setting the tone. So when we say we should not leave behind the Global South, we really need to show this in our action. And how we can do that? We can do that through, like the GDC process which has been adopted and the governments have sort of committed themselves. I think the real challenge now is how to see those in action. I think it's for the government. Many a times when I'm in these conversations, most of the time it's like influenced by governments and the companies. And I think we really need to bring civil society in. When we say multi-stakeholderism, it's not just 2-3 actors. Civil society is the important actor, which can actually inform all the decisions around technology and design and deployment, which can inform the regulations that our countries are coming up with. And you mentioned the feedback loop. The feedback loop will be the experts, not only the tech experts, but the civil society who actually have been working on ground and actually know how the governments are trying to regulate and what we really need to do when it comes to international human rights framework. And I'm really proud of the work of H Lab, to be honest, because we did really good job. And yesterday, when we could see that the recommendations became part of the GDC process, I feel like it's a win for all of us. I think the challenge for FOC is also what the role they can play, like as powerful governments, that the Global South, they actually take along the Global South countries with them and not leave them behind.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Nigat. Certainly a lot of gains over the last few months, I think. But of course, still a lot of challenges. And I think from the comments that we've had here, of course, not any kind of binary notions of rights or development, social or economic, that these have to be inclusive. But I just wanted to pose one question to you all in terms of where FOC needs to go and how it can continue to remain very relevant to this very complex environment and now implementation challenges that we're facing. And I'm wanting you also to take an opportunity, maybe briefly, to respond to each other, which I could see you were trying to do, but then we will have to close off the session. But I guess a lot of these documents continue to be within a responsible and ethical AI framework, although I think certainly the Global Digital Compact commitments and the AI to Humanity have taken that forward somewhat. But I guess the question is, can we have these frameworks that are rights preserving, that are ethical, that are human-centered, and yet fail to produce just outcomes? So there's a lot of reference, I think 177 references to rights in the AI for Humanity document. But in all of these documents, I think in earlier versions of the Global Digital Compact, there were no references to justice. Unfortunately, we lost some of those. But is that possible? Could we get these rights frameworks in place, ethically now designed, we do what we can with what we've got, and yet we're still producing systemically, unjust outcomes. And maybe you could respond to each other as well. And then we've got only 5 minutes, so literally a minute each if you would, please. Like a minute and a half. Why don't we start with you again?
So maybe I'll sit here to make it more of a conversation. But, well, first of all, I think it is important, and this is really one of my big concerns, that we sometimes think that what happens online is different. outside the legal framework that we have all established. And it's really important to bring it back to that. It's a myth to think that human rights don't apply online. They do apply online. It's just that we need to translate it, and they provide, I mean, I said it in another panel, I mean, if we look at traffic regulations, we know why we need traffic regulations, because otherwise, you know, you may not actually survive your day driving a car or being driven or whatever else. So we need the human rights framework in this very sensitive area precisely to be both the guardrails but also the transformational force that is behind it in order to achieve what we're trying to achieve, both on the inequality side, on the inequity side, and on the transformational side, on the visionary side. And human rights are universal, they are intergenerational, and they do take into account the impact of our decisions today, of the type of products that we put out on not only the present generation, but also the future generation. And that's really what human rights pushes us to do. And let's not forget, it's a normative framework that is obliging, that is not just discretionary. It's actually obligation that states have and businesses have. And we have actually gained, over the last couple of years, the recognition that the private sector also has obligations under human rights law, and which is why we have the guiding principles on business and human rights. And I think that's what is so absolutely critical. In all the regulatory frameworks, in all the governance frameworks that, as a result of the HLAB report and the GDC that we're going to build up now, and I think time is absolutely of the essence, I fully agree with you, we need to use that and make it fully functioning, but realizing it as something that is binding.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think in terms of operationalizing human rights, the report has 177 references to human rights, which is always nice, but I think it fundamentally boils down to how does a country operationalize those? And I think there's some really great examples, particularly from the UNGPs, but also from groups like GNI and BSR for the private sector that really sets out those practical ways of thinking about this. So the question then becomes, from the HLAB report, how do we take those very practical methodologies to state actors, right? And then non-state actors, which includes civil society, and how can they be involved in that process as well? And I think the Freedom Online Coalition definitely has a really extraordinarily important role to play there, in the sense that because these are rights-respecting countries, because the mandate is human rights, the question then becomes, can the Freedom Online Coalition member states take the HLAB report and really become an exemplar of how do you operationalize those, actually put those written words into practical commitments, and then demonstrate to other countries who are probably thinking about how do we do this, to show this is how you actually do it. And I think that's really going to be sort of a great way for us to start. The other thing I want to flag is, in terms of the Global South, is, I think we have to really move beyond participation to actual, like, having voice on the table. I think oftentimes, at least in rooms that I'm in, I hear a lot about Global South participation. We brought the Global South along. And my question always is, how, right? How were they in the room? Did they have a voice? Was it part of the decision making? Did we think about the resource constraint that exists in these countries? The political dynamics, the environments, there's a lot of equities at play, which goes beyond the economic ones, but also fundamentally the political environments. So I hope, as we think about operationalizing human rights and a way forward for AI, particularly because these can exacerbate existing inequalities, we also think about the current reality of the Global South countries, and potentially when we are bringing them along, we're not just giving them a seat at the table, but actual opportunities to start influencing decisions and bring their realities to the table as well. And I think that's kind of where we have a proper multi-stakeholder process on how do we operationalize human rights and AI.
Thank you for those important points, Sarah. Sarah.
I'll be very quick and try and tie those two things together. I agree on all of them, and I think operationalizing the incredible work that you guys did in the HLAB is really important. And one of the ways that I think maybe does that, which is not within sort of like a governance framework, there's obviously the regulatory opportunity to do that, which I'm not sure is the right place, but like, what is the best practices checklist? And that checklist cannot be the same for every part of government. Whether if you're a public health ministry, it's very different than if you are a Ministry of Defense is very different. If you are civil society is very different if you are business. And this is actually an idea that I can't take credit for, but comes from one of the members of the HLab board who has seen this happen in the healthcare sector in the country that he's from, of how do we just very practically give the person that is supposed to be implementing their AI strategy in their organization and say, this is how you do it in a way that makes sense, is for your organization, that upholds human rights, that upholds sort of the ethical standards that we all have agreed to, and making sure that we can translate from sort of broad policy prescriptions to an actual operationalization of this work.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I mean, building upon what Dia said, how to operationalize what is in this big high-level documents. But I would also say that, civil society role is now all the more important. And I would really like to just call out some of the folks here who have been doing this. AI is not something that has just come out of nowhere. It's part of the larger ecosystem. And folks like GNI, Access Now, Ushahidi, like so many of my CSO friends are sitting here. I think we are departing from, when we say multi-stakeholderism, we are departing from the international human rights framework and also letting civil society be part of these conversations. So I think that's something we really need to focus, but also existing platforms also have a role to play. We have moved on to emerging tech and AI, but there are tech giants who are still very up and running in the global south countries. Some tech giants, platforms that the global north has given up on, but they are thriving in our countries and playing huge negative role in politics of our countries. So I feel that, the current ones who are still engaging with the civil society actors, for instance, Meta, for instance, Google, they have trusted partners, they have trusted flaggers. They really need to see that how they can make their content moderation policies more better while they are using automation system. We at the Oversight Board has released a report on AI and content moderation. So, there's several developments are happening, and I feel that Commissioner told what you have mentioned, your advisory initiative, which actually inform, the governments, the civil society, and tech companies around how they can actually contextualize these high-level frameworks. I think that's a really good initiative that we really need to follow on.
Thank you so much for that. We're out of time. I know we're meant to take a photograph. If we could quickly fit that in. Somehow we have to do that. Thanks very much to everyone. Give everyone a big hand.
I would like to warmly thank the panelists and the moderator for the interesting discussion. We will now proceed to the next part of the program. We are delighted to have a number of representatives of FOC member states and the Advisory Council with us. Our first speaker is His Excellency Tobias Lindner, Minister of State at the Federal Office of the Federal Republic of Germany. And I would like to kindly remind all speakers to please observe the 2-minute limit for speaking. Thank you.
Well, good morning, and I will try my best to stick to the 2 minutes. Excellencies, colleagues, friends. First of all, I'd like to applaud the Kingdom of the Netherlands for chairing the FOC and for convening this pivotal event here today. And Germany will continue to actively support the Freedom Online Coalition. Second, we welcome Colombia as the 41st member of the FOC, and I believe this underlines the vitality of this like-minded group of countries from all regions of the world who are joined in their commitment to protection of a free internet and safeguarding of human rights in a digital age. And we are all sure the future is a digital one, increasingly and inevitably, and this is why we adopted yesterday the Global Digital Compact. Let me say it's the first global attempt to define principles and guidelines for free, open, and safe, inclusive, human-centered digital future of all mankind. I believe it will not be the last attempt, but it's a necessary and important first step. And safeguarding human rights in the digital age is an imperative for my country's digital policy. So let me highlight just some core messages today. First of all, and that was highlighted by the discussion, we have to find the right balance between the advantages, between reaping the fruits of innovation for the benefit of humankind by using AI on the one hand, and on the other hand, by the mitigation of the possible human rights impact on the other side. And by the way, governments, administrations, they have to invest into digital and especially AI literacy in order to keep up the speed with the technological innovation. Second, with its AI Act, the European Union is a first mover in international AI governance, a governance committed to strong human rights, democracy, and rule of law standards. Third, we are pleased to see that many FOC partners like the USA, the United Kingdom, and others join the EU in signing the AI Convention of the Council of Europe this month, underlining its global approach. This convention enshrines a commitment to check all AI legislature and measures against their impact on human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. And we invite all FOC members to accede to the convention, including the most recent one. Fourth, when it comes to the Global Digital Compact, FOC members will lead the implementation of its commitment to respect and protect human rights in digital technologies. This will allow us to harness their potential to fulfill the Sustainable Development Goals, to bridge digital divides, and to support a human-centric and value-based digital transformation globally. We underline the UN's role in this regard with its legitimacy, convening power, and normative impact. And last but not least, Germany supports the FOC joint statement on responsible government practices for AI technologies because we are convinced in leading by example. At the Federal Foreign Office, we have developed an AI charter, a first set of AI guardrails to design and use of AI within the German Foreign Service. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your statement. And our next speaker is His Excellency Lashad Asalia. He's the First Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Georgia.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, Excellencies. At the outset, I would like to thank the Netherlands as the 2024 chair of the Freedom Online Coalition for organizing today's ministerial meeting on such a highly relevant issue. Artificial intelligence has significantly reshaped our world, affecting countless aspects of daily life. Its influence reaches far and wide, touching the all fundamental pillars of the United Nations: peace and security, human rights, and development. In the face of current challenges, artificial intelligence holds the promise to spark remarkable advancements for the benefit of humanity, including turbocharging the implementation of the SDGs, revolutionizing healthcare, and unlocking new frontiers in scientific research. Nevertheless, without proper governance, AI's potential benefits may not be fully realized or may be distributed unevenly, leading to critical risks for human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. The rise of misinformation and disinformation, online violence and harassment, invasion of privacy, among other human rights violations can place heavy strain on societies. Therefore, human rights-based governance will have a holistic and global approach grounded upon international law and the SDGs is crucial for balancing the need to address potential risks with the opportunity to leverage AI's benefit in a way that advances safe, secure, and trustworthy AI systems. In this vein, we welcome the recent adoption of the Global Digital Compact. We are pleased to note that Georgia was among the 10 signatories of the Council of Europe Framework Convention on Artificial Intelligence and Human Rights, Democracy, and Rule of Law, the first ever international legally binding treaty in this field. I would also like to draw attention to the recent report from the UN High-Level Advisory Board on AI, which offers valuable insight for human rights-based AI governance. In conclusion, let me stress that Georgia, as the member of the FOC, as well as the chair of the Community of Democracies Working Group on Technology and Democracies, joins the international community's efforts towards charting the global course for human rights-based AI governance for the benefit of humanity. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your statement. We'll proceed with the next speaker. Our next speaker is Henri Verdier. He's Ambassador for Digital Affairs of France.
Good afternoon. So, 2 minutes, I will be very quick. First, I think that we all can thank the FOC, the Netherlands, and all the panelists for this very timely meeting. We are facing a very important issue, and frankly speaking, I don't think we are ready yet. So yes, we have now a good framework, and that's great. Yes, I feel that constitutional AI seems to be a promising approach, but we know that a real democracy needs more than a constitution. We need law enforcement, judges that can change their mind or have controversies. We need a public debate, free elections, a good public space for a good public debate. So I'm not sure we have everything here to face the future. Plus, and I want to share this with you, personally, I fear more human using AI than AI. So we have to think about bad actors and evildoers, etc., and we will empower them as we will empower law enforcement. So we are not completely ready. We have to face, I think that the human rights enforcement will be central in the years to come and will require new tools. And because I'm quite a veteran of the digital revolution, I started 30 years ago, I want to share with you 2 important basic rules of the digital revolution. Probably most of you know them. The first one is that code is law. In our sector, very important decisions are within the deep code. And we will have in the next years to pay attention to the code and the data. Transparency, auditability, accountability will matter a lot. And I don't know if we are prepared for this. The second important law is the Kranzberg law. Do you know the Kranzberg law? So technology is not good nor bad, neither neutral. And probably we'll have to start thinking about the far and indirect consequences of AI. What will it change in our societies, in our works, in the sense of dignity of human being, etc. And to prepare ourselves for unexpected and far consequences of this revolution. So I cannot elaborate much more, but I can tell you that we do organize in Paris on February 10 and 11 the next AI Action Summit, and that we will continue this conversation with all of you in Paris. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your statement. Next is Dr. Winifred Nafisa Mahama, Director of Information Services of the Republic of Ghana.
Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, permit me to stand on already established protocols. I'm honored to address this gathering on the critical topic of artificial intelligence and its implications for human rights. The rapid advancement of AI technology presents us with remarkable opportunities to drive human well-being and sustainable development. But it also demands that we address its inherent risk. As we chart this global course, it is essential to ensure that AI is governed in a manner grounded in human rights principles. Ghana, as a strong advocate for digital rights in Africa, is firmly committed to developing AI as a tool for empowerment and enhancing lives across various sectors, including healthcare, education, agriculture, and industry. However, we are also acutely aware that without responsible governance, AI may pose threats to human rights. This underscores the need for ethical frameworks that govern the development and deployment of AI in line with global human rights standards. As a member of the Freedom Online Coalition, Ghana remains committed to open governance and accountability. The coalition, now comprising 41 governments, is instrumental in advancing digital rights, and we are proud to contribute to this important work. In 2019, we enacted the Right to Information law to empower our citizens with access to public information, thereby promoting accountability and citizens' participation in governance. This October, Ghana will host the International Day for the Universal Access to Information in Accra, the first time an African country will do so, reinforcing our dedication to transparency and the free flow of information. In alignment with the principles highlighted by the UN General Assembly's first resolution on AI, Ghana is actively developing a comprehensive AI governance framework. This includes innovative approaches such as an AI-enhanced online application system designed to facilitate public access to information across all government sectors. Such initiatives reflect our belief that AI must be used to foster inclusive governance and empower citizens. To further support this vision, Ghana is partnering with international stakeholders to provide advanced AI prompt engineering training for public relations officers across government institutions.
You kindly wrap up your
This
statement.
training equips our officers with the necessary tools to leverage AI effectively for information dissemination. Ghana's ongoing investments in AI, rooted in ethical consideration and human rights, are positioning our nation as a leader in the responsible and innovative use of this technology. By working together as a global community, we can harness AI's potential to promote human development, prosperity, and respect for human rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, for your statement. We still have three speakers who will briefly speak. We'll start with Rose Jackson, and I invite you to take the floor. You're Director of the Democracy and Tech Initiative at the Atlantic Council.
Thank you. And in the interest of time, I'm going to do my best to shorten and wing this. We're at a critical moment right now for the global order and the future of human rights in the long term. I say that as we're here on the margins of the Global Digital Compact having been negotiated, the Summit for the Future, and many of us deep in a conversation on the Cybercrime Treaty, which is inherently linked to everything we're talking about today. And while this is a discussion about the future of AI governance, much of AI technology will be developed through, on, and rely on the internet that we've spent how many years as members of the Freedom Online Coalition seeking to shape, to preserve human rights for the long term, whether you live in China, the United States, Ghana, or anywhere in the world. Many things can be true at the same time. Some countries currently seek to undermine that consensus. They see an open internet as a threat to their ability to control their own citizens and to project their power globally into the world. At the same time, there are plenty of people in this room and elsewhere that feel rightfully frustrated with the consolidation of power in the United States and Europe, whether that is corporate power or the power to decide the governance of how we access these technologies. But the internet has generated immense social good for the world, and it has done that because it was built on the concepts of human rights. It's open, it's collaborative, it's free, and no one owns it. So what do we do with that today? allow me the opportunity as a member of civil society to ask the countries here, those members of the Freedom Online Coalition, view your actions in this coalition and the community that you have at your disposal as high politics. This is an extension of your core interest in the world as democracies, and it is a profound opportunity to ensure that this next generation of technology, we learn from the errors of the past, but build on the strength we have in this coalition and the internet that we all rely on. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rose, for your statement. Next is Adeboye Adegoke, Senior Manager at the Paradigm Initiative.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity for us to make this remark, and thanks to the government of Netherlands for putting together this event. Global efforts towards building a better digital future for all gain momentum with the adoption of the Pact of the Future at the ongoing UN Summit of the Future. At Paradigm Initiative, we have worked with the Freedom Online Coalition as member of the Advisory Council to support processes that ensure that we show some leadership in terms of how we think in terms of global development around digital technology. And I'll speak specifically to some of the efforts that we have taken to ensure that these efforts cascade down to what happens in our respective countries. About 6 months ago, we entered into an MOU with the National Human Rights Institution in Nigeria to provide technical support to enable them to be able to support human rights development and human rights protection in the digital age. Just before we traveled down to New York, we submitted a draft regulation on digital rights and freedom for Nigeria. Why did I have to tell you this? We couldn't have done this without some of the support that we have also received from our participation in the Freedom Online Coalition, our ability to participate in global process and to cascade that down to influencing national policy and regional policies. A few days ago, a few of us gathered at the South African mission right here in New York to look at the effort of the African Union in promoting human rights in the context of artificial intelligence. If I would leave with a statement today, it is that every global effort would make much more significance when we cascade them to national processes. And to be able to do that, we need a lot of capacity development for organizations that are engaging in global processes, for them to be able to cascade this work in their national processes. And I trust that the Freedom Online Coalition will continue to be the platform for the realization of that objective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adeboye. So we are coming closely to the end of this segment of the program. We still have one more speaker. It's Mariana Iskander, CEO of the Wikimedia Foundation. Please.
The last speaker. I'm Mariana Iskander, the CEO of the Wikimedia Foundation. This is the global nonprofit that hosts Wikipedia and supports the hundreds of thousands of volunteers who contribute to Wikipedia's content and accuracy. Certainly leading up to this week, we have heard a lot of concern about how difficult it is becoming to find accurate information online, particularly when AI chatbots give us answers without always explaining where they got the information and what sources they used. Wikipedia is the largest source of open information on the internet, with content in over 300 languages. Every large language model uses Wikipedia in its training, and it is almost always the largest source of training data for large language models. So we really understand the critical role of human contribution to AI and to building the sum of all knowledge. Community-led public interest projects that work transparently in the open, like Wikipedia, are key to any solution. I'm closing with 3 sentences. We ask governments who care about the facts to protect the people that curate them and to support community-led, open, public interest projects in this work. And we call on the private sector and others to work with us on standards of attribution so that the human value and contribution to AI is understood and recognized. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariana, for your statement. And now we're coming to the very last part, an exciting part of our program. We still have 2 distinguished keynote speakers who will be delivering closing remarks. The first speaker is His Excellency Marcus Jacna, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. If not, forgive me. Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Estonia. The floor is yours.
Excellencies, dear friends, you pronounced my name in a very good way. It took a couple of years for Estonians as well to get rid of that. But technology has revolutionized the way we communicate, access information, and engage with the world. The AI has taken a step further by reshaping every aspect of our lives and completely changing the way we understand the world around us. The AI holds immense power to help us solve many of the significant problems the world is facing. This is why our conversation today is not just a conversation about technology, but a conversation about the future of humanity itself. As you know, Estonia is called the digital nation. We were one of the first to digitalize our government, the public services, and we continue to lead in e-governance. 99% of public services are online, and we have decided to move on the next level, that services are coming to people without bureaucracy and without applications, together with AI. But digital societies cannot be built on technology only, as the true building blocks of e-governance are the values that we have built it on. Openness, transparency, access to information, inclusivity, co-creation, just to name a couple of them. Technology governance of the world should follow these values by design model. Technology and online space must be governed by principles that protect dignity, privacy, and freedoms of every individual. We know that AI is not neutral, but a reflection of the data, algorithms, and most importantly, the values that shaped it. Let me reiterate, if we are to harness AI for the betterment of humanity, we must ensure that it is guided by a deep respect for human rights, rights that are universal, indivisible, and inherent to all of us. The challenge is clear: how to create a governance framework for technology and AI that upholds these rights, ensures equity, and forces trust across borders. This is no small task, but it is an essential one. Today, you have highlighted what must be done to deliver these results. It would like to share that I deem to be critical principle on technology governance that should guide us in our deliberations, the principle of fairness. In Estonia, time and again, we have come to a conclusion that technology must work for everyone, not for just a privileged few. We must prevent copying existing inequalities to ensure that technology is inclusive and works for everyone. Technology of the 21st century must leave no one behind. This is our principle. To achieve this, an inclusive global dialogue is needed where all voices are heard, particularly those from the civil society as well as a global majority. This brings us to the ongoing efforts in technology and internet governance, such as Global Digital Compact and the World Summit on the Information Society. These processes are crucial steps towards establishing a framework for the responsible and inclusive governance of technology. In these processes, we must work together and include all stakeholders, government, civil society, academy, and private sector, as mentioned before. Only then we can develop the principles for an information society that works for all of us. The protection of human rights is a collective effort that requires global coordination and solidarity. There is no better example for coordination and solidarity than Freedom Online Coalition. Since its creation, Estonia has been actively contributing to its overall. In 2014, we held the Freedom Online Conference in Tallinn, and we also adopted the Tallinn Agenda. Tallinn is our capital, as you understand as well. And this Tallinn Agenda is one of the foundational documents for now of the Freedom Online Coalition, guiding the work of the coalition. Therefore, in the mindset of coordination and solidarity, as well as Estonian active participation throughout the years, I'm really happy to announce that in 2025, next year, Estonia will be the chair of the Freedom Online Coalition. As discussed today, it is crucial to get technology governance right. This is why it will be at the very heart of our chairship. I would like to thank the Netherlands, dear Casper, Prime Minister of the Netherlands, for all the hard work you have done this year. You will be leaving us a big shoes to fill, but it is my sincere hope that we can continue this work closely and coordinate with each other. And I would like to end my speech with a call. Let us chart the course and technology governance together with wisdom, compassion, and unwavering commitment to the rights that make us humans. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your remarks and for taking on next year's chairship of the Freedom Online Coalition. And now it's my great honor to introduce you all to our very last speaker, His Excellency Antony J. Blinken, Secretary of State of the United States. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. As the last speaker, I'm probably the only thing standing between you and a coffee break. So, and let me just say to everyone here, welcome to High Level Week at the UN General Assembly. As a veteran of that week, I've done it many times before, I just have 3 words of advice to everyone in this room. Take the subway. I want to at least be helpful today. Look, as you look at, for all of us, for my colleagues in particular, this week is full of events. And if we were to do everything that we've been invited to do, there wouldn't be enough hours in the day. So in many ways, the schedules that we do have reflect what's genuinely important to us and to the governments we represent. And so I think our presence here today is a reflection of the value give to this issue and to the Freedom Online Coalition. I just want to thank first Ambassador Tazib. Thank you, to the Netherlands for chairing the Freedom Online Coalition this year, for hosting all of us here today. We're also grateful to Estonia, my friend, a leader, of course, in digital governance, for serving as the chair next year. To the fellow members of this coalition, and to partners from civil society, from the United Nations, from the private sector, thank you for joining us today. From day one, President Biden has made defending democracy at home and around the world a core priority for his administration. In the fight for our democracies in the 21st century, the front lines are increasingly online. Around the world, authoritarian regimes are weaponizing technology to censor, surveil, to repress their citizens. Meanwhile, citizens and civil society groups use social media, online messaging, to organize, to wield smartphones to document human rights abuses, to share them with the entire world. The United States is committed to ensuring that digital technologies enhance the rights and the privacy of our people and expand broad-based opportunity. We're determined to work with fellow democracies to realize that goal. That's why the first Summit for Democracy, 2021, we pledged to reinvigorate the Freedom Online Coalition, double down on our shared efforts to safeguard and advance a free and open internet. And that's exactly what the coalition has done. Over the past 4 years, we've grown from 32 members to 41. We welcomed Cabo Verde, Slovenia, and Colombia just this year, as well as Taiwan as an observer. Together, this coalition is enhancing internet freedom and combating censorship. For example, the United States, Germany, Estonia have supported the Open Technology Fund to help millions of people acquire virtual private networks or VPNs and other tools to circumvent firewalls, internet shutdowns, empowering activists, journalists from Russia to Iran to Cuba. The coalition is also taking steps to curb digital surveillance. We work together to define guardrails for the use of surveillance technologies by governments. We've mobilized 17 nations who are committed to countering the misuse and abuse of commercial spyware. The United States has worked to lead by example, including imposing visa restrictions and sanctions against companies and individuals who exploit these technologies. This coalition is also exchanging lessons on how to expose, how to disrupt, how to deter disinformation. Members are working to build a more resilient global information system and to hold accountable those seeking to undermine democratic elections. Critically, we're shaping the frameworks and the rules for the responsible development and use of artificial intelligence, technology that perhaps more than any other will affect the future of freedoms, online and offline. This year, the United States, with the support of members of this coalition, helped craft and put forward a landmark UN resolution to use safe, secure, trustworthy AI to promote sustainable development. Every member state adopted that resolution, the first at the United Nations. Hopefully this sets a framework and sets a foundation going forward for AI. A few weeks ago, we joined fellow democracies in signing the Council of Europe's AI Convention, the world's first multilateral treaty on AI and human rights. Today, the Freedom Online Coalition is releasing a joint statement on responsible AI practices, spelling out how governments can procure and use artificial intelligence in a way that protects rights, safety, privacy for citizens. All of us should move swiftly to implement these principles, but also encourage partners beyond the coalition to do the same thing. So I think we can take some pride in the progress that we've made, but I think each of us knows we cannot let up. This is such a fast-moving area that standing still means getting behind. And authoritarian regimes are determined to co-opt and abuse technology to repress their people. We have to be equally determined in our mission to defend freedom online. We look forward, part of the United States, to continuing this vital work together in the months and years to come. We know, as with virtually everything else we do, when we're doing it together, when we join forces, and not just among governments, but with the private sector, with civil society and NGOs, there's nothing we can't get done. We share the determination to do it and do it together. Thank you very much for everyone's work on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Blinken, for your closing remarks. Secretary Blinken mentioned coffee, but would like to first invite all speakers to center stage for a collective photo. And while they come forward, I would like to thank everyone for being here. And the session has closed right now. Thank you.
Cut?
Yeah.
Cut. See, did he leave already? Did he leave already?